Defeat does not exist. If you are inclined to think defeatist thoughts, I cannot recommend enough that you rid yourself of them as soon as possible, because the best way to see them materialize is to nurture them. What you need to adopt is an attitude along the lines of, I do not believe in defeat. I hope you are not like a certain Mr. Yes But that I've heard about. He was nicknamed so because no matter what suggestions were made to him, his mind inevitably had the reflex to evoke all the disadvantages and possible obstacles. But one day, he found someone to talk to and drew a lesson from it that helped him change his negative attitude. Here's how it happened. The leaders of the company that employed him were studying a project, the various aspects of which, considerable expenses, certain risks, and chances of success, needed to be considered. During discussions about this perilous initiative, Mr. Yesbut intervened several times, always with that peremptory tone so common among such people, which often serves only to conceal great internal doubts. Invariably, his comments were of the sort, "Gentlemen, let's not get carried away. I would like us to take a closer look at the difficulties presented by this project." At a certain point, one of the participants in this meeting, a discreet and reserved man who had spoken little so far but was unanimously respected by his colleagues for his competence, asked for the floor. This man, whose charisma left no one indifferent, addressed our skeptic. "Why," he asked him, "do you dwell more on the difficulties of this project than on its chances of success?" "Because," replied the other, "if you want to act intelligently, you must always be realistic. However, I note that this project involves undeniable difficulties. May I ask what your attitude would be toward them?" "My attitude? Well, I will simply dismiss them and move on," replied the reserved man without hesitation. "Easier said than done," said the skeptic. "I would like to know how you go about dismissing difficulties and forgetting about them. Have you developed a technique that none of us has yet discovered?" The reserved man's face lit up with a smile. "Young man," he began, "I have spent my whole life dismissing difficulties, and never have I encountered one that couldn't be, as long as you have enough faith, something in the gut, and you willing to put in the necessary effort. But since you want to know what my trick is, I will tell you right away." He then reached into one of his pockets and pulled out his wallet and, opening it, revealed a small card tucked into a plastic compartment on which were scribbled a few words. He placed the wallet on the meeting room table and, addressing Mr. Yes But again, said to him, "Here it is. I call it my formula. Read this and don't come back to me with refrains like, 'It doesn't work. Neither does this.' My experience has proven otherwise many times." The skeptic took the card and, perplexed, began to scan it. "Read it aloud," insisted the man with the wallet, and the other began to read slowly in a hesitant voice. "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Philippians 4:13. The man with the wallet took back the card, put it back in his pocket, and continued, "I have a long experience of life, and I have had to face many difficulties. So I can tell you that these words have power, real power, and that, thanks to them, you can overcome all obstacles." He spoke with confidence, and everyone knew he was sincere. Faced with difficulties, this positive attitude, coupled with the events that had marked his life and were known to all, for he was a remarkable man who had succeeded against the odds, and because he was no healthier than anyone else, ensured that his words had a convincing effect on all the participants in that meeting. From that moment on, no more negative comments were made. The project was accepted, and despite the difficulties and risks involved, it was successful. The technique used by this man is based on an essential reality, not being afraid of difficulties and putting into practice the conviction that God is with you, and that with His help, you have the power to counter obstacles, whatever they may be. The first thing to do when any obstacle arises is simply to stand up, without complaining or whining, and tackle it resolutely, on the spot. Do not be discouraged by the difficulties you encounter, but react. You will find that they are actually much less formidable than you thought. Any obstacle can be overcome It is possible that your subconscious, always reluctant to embrace change, whispers in your ear, "You won't believe such nonsense." Remember that your subconscious is in this sense the biggest liar there is. It contributes to your making the gravest errors of assessment about your abilities and sinking deeper into them. You have fed your subconscious with your negative attitude, and it is precisely this mistaken image of yourself and your abilities that it reflects back to you. You must react and convey to your subconscious the following message. Listen to me well. I believe in these things. I insist on it. I believe in them. If you address your subconscious positively, you will succeed in convincing it because you are then feeding it with positive thoughts. An effective method to instill a positive character in the subconscious is to deliberately eliminate from your vocabulary and mind certain phrases that we might call little repellents that constantly pepper conversations. Though individually they may seem perfectly harmless, their cumulative effect causes a negative conditioning of the mind. When this idea first crossed my mind, I began to analyze my own language habits, and I was shocked by what I discovered. I realized that my conversations were riddled with expressions like, "I'm afraid of being late," or "I wonder if I'm going to get a flat tire," or "I don't think I'm capable of doing that," or "I'll never be able to finish this work. There's so much to do." If things go wrong, I might as well exclaim, "That's just what I thought." Sometimes, looking at the sky and seeing the clouds gather, I muttered darkly, "I knew it was going to rain." These are, of course, little repellents, and while it remains true that such manifestations are less significant and less harmful than a genuine generalized negative attitude, it is nonetheless true that the mighty oak is a little acorn that has grown. So, if a host of little repellents punctuate your conversation, they will eventually seep into your mind and grow there. I found that the best way to get rid of them was to deliberately make positive comments about everything and nothing. When you constantly tell yourself that things will work out in the end, that you can do the job, that you won't have a flat tire, that you'll be on time, you invoke the law of positive effects, and beneficial results eventually manifest. Events then take a favorable turn. The power of conviction. If a difficulty has been dogging you for a while, it's probably because for weeks, months, or even years, you have been nurturing the idea that there is nothing to be done about it. You have emphasized so much your inability to cope with it that your mind has gradually come to accept your helplessness and your failures. When the mind convinces itself of something, it conditions the whole being because that's how the mind and the human being in general work. But when, on the contrary, you embrace the fresh and creative idea that I can accomplish anything, you develop a completely different mental outlook. Strengthen this positive attitude even more, and you will eventually convince your own conscience that you can perfectly well face your difficulties. When your mind has acquired this conviction, truly astonishing results will begin to manifest. You will suddenly discover powers you had never been aware of before. The obstacles you face do exist. They are not mere figments, but in fact, they are not as tough as they seem. Your mental attitude remains crucial. Be convinced that you will succeed if you keep your eyes fixed on the source of your power. Tell yourself that through this power, you can meet any challenge. Be convinced that this power is within you and will free you from your tensions. Believe in this, and victory will be yours. Take a closer look at the obstacle troubling you. You will find that it is not as insurmountable as you imagined. Tell yourself, the obstacle is only in my head. I think victory and I win. In mechanics, it is learned that resistance causes friction. Therefore, it is important to eliminate or at least reduce these frictions. Negative attitude is an approach that generates friction. That is why pessimism creates such strong resistance. The positive approach, on the other hand, is based on the technique of attacking the soft spot. It is in harmony with the normal course of the universe. Not only does it encounter less resistance, but it truly stimulates related forces. It is remarkable to note to what extent from the beginning to the end of our earthly existence. The application of this principle enables us to achieve fruitful results in areas where, without its help, we would be doomed to failure. Take the example of this woman who entrusted her 15-year-old son to a doctor to straighten him out. In none of his courses could he get a grade higher than 70%, which worried his mother to no end. "This boy has great intellectual potential," she proclaimed proudly. "How can you be so sure?" asked the doctor. "Because he's my son," she replied. Then she added, "I graduated from university magna cum laude myself." The boy stepped forward, looking sullen. "So, son, what's wrong?" asked the doctor. "I don't know. My mother asked me to come and see you." "Yes, you don't seem overflowing with enthusiasm," said the doctor. "Your mother tells me you can't get more than 70%. Yes, he replied. "That's the maximum I reach, and sometimes I even fall short." "Do you think you're intelligent, son?" asked the doctor. "My mother claims so." "I don't know. I think, doctor, that I'm pretty much a complete idiot," he said convincingly. "I study my lessons regularly. At home, I read my texts at least twice, and then I close my books and try to remember what I just read. I go through the same process about 3 times, and finally, I tell myself that if I can't do it after 3 times, well, I'll never do it. The next day, I go to school telling myself that I know my lessons, and when the teacher asks me a question, I stand there, unable to say a word, unable to remember anything. And then, he continued, exams come, and I am all nervous, unable to recall the correct answers. I can't understand why. I know my mother used to get excellent results. I suppose I just don't have it in me. Obviously, this type of negative thinking, combined with the sense of inferiority that his mother, through her attitude, had instilled in him, completely crushed him. There was a blockage in his mind. His mother had never asked him to go to school and study for the simple pleasure of learning and satisfying his curiosity. She had not suggested that he set personal challenges for himself rather than measuring himself against others. Moreover, she always insisted that he repeat his academic performances to her. Under these conditions, it's no wonder he completely froze under maternal pressure. To help him, the doctor suggested a few tricks that had proven effective. Before you start studying your lessons, he said, stop for a moment and tell yourself that you are intelligent, capable of doing your work well. Then, relax and approach your reading as if nothing is wrong, as if you're reading a story. Don't reread any passage unless you want to. Just convince yourself that you can understand everything on the first try. Picture what you read as a plant starting to sprout. The next day on your way to school, say this to yourself. My mother is wonderful. She is very beautiful and very kind. But to achieve such academic results, she must have been a kind of old bookworm. And who would want to be like that? I don't want to become magna anything. All I want is to finish my studies and get decent results. At school, he continued, when the teacher asks you a question, think briefly before answering. Trust yourself to help you find the right answer immediately. The boy followed the doctor's advice, and what do you think happened? The next semester, he got 90%. I am certain that this boy, having discovered the astonishing effectiveness of the philosophy of I do not believe in defeat, will henceforth rely on the surprising power of positive thinking in all areas of his life.